Hey, what's up everybody? This is Jordan of Scale History SLC, and today I've got a video highlighting my Romanian army for bolt action. A couple months ago I did a video like this for my Japanese army, and I got a lot of good feedback, and so I thought I would run through my Romanian platoon as well. I know Romania is kind of a side faction. As a minor faction, it's definitely not played as much as some of the other mainstays like Germany, USA, Russia, etc. So I think this video might be helpful for those who are thinking of starting a Romanian army. Maybe to help them choose some units, just look at what the possibilities are for creating a Romanian army. Romania is actually pretty flexible in bolt action, and I'll get into more detail about why I chose them in a bit. But the first thing I gotta recommend is, of course, you need the armies of Italy and the Axis to get the base Romanian rules. And if you have that already, I definitely recommend grabbing Campaign Fortress Budapest. I guess it would be pronounced Budapest, but I'm American, so my pronunciations are all off, especially for Romanian things. Budapest is in Hungary. I'm done. So Campaign Fortress Budapest is actually the reason why I got into playing Romania. So I bought this book. I had already begun building a winter German army, and I actually wanted to build Hungarians. But my buddy that I was going to be playing through this campaign with ended up already purchasing Hungarians, so I'm like, well, I need someone for him to fight. And I had Soviets, but then I was looking at the Romanians that are included in this book. I hadn't looked at Romanians at all prior to this. And so as I started digging into their history and their rules in bolt action, I realized Romania is actually a very flexible force for bolt action. And what I mean by that is Romania started the war on the side of the Axis, fighting with Germany. They actually they gave more manpower to the Axis side than any of the other minor nations. I think it was like 200,000 fighting men that invaded the Soviet Union alongside the Germans and the other Axis nations. So you can play the Romanians as an Axis faction from 1941 all the way up to like mid-1944. That gives you a ton of options for early war loadouts, but you can also get into the later war loadouts with Panzerfaust, Panther tanks, all that good stuff. The Axis support rule is really nice, and I'll talk a little bit more about that, especially as I talk about my tanks. But the cool thing about the Romanians is you can also play them as late war allies. So around late 1944, the Romanians actually flipped sides, joined the Soviet Union, and turned their guns against the Germans and the rest of the Axis nations. So this means that I can play my Romanians as both Axis or allies. And here in Salt Lake, we have a lot of events that are Axis versus Allies, so that helps out a ton. But yeah, they basically span early war to late war, have tons of options. And it was kind of a no-brainer for me. So I jumped in, and here we are. So in my Japanese video, I showed an image of the products, like the miniatures and where the models came from. I'm not going to do that on this video because pretty much everything you see here comes from Great Escape Games. They have a fantastic selection of Romanian units, and I have almost the entire winter line. So I'll just link that in the description below. If a certain miniature comes from a different place, I'll let you know as I'm describing it. Oh man, I totally forgot. Speaking of late war, gotta put in my Sherman. Oh man, it's really late. So first up is the little Renault R35. This is a 3D print from a buddy of mine. Tiny little tank, but Romania actually had a ton of these in service when they invaded the Soviet Union with the Germans. And they got them from all over the place, but actually a lot of them came from Poland. When Poland was defeated, a lot of these Polish tankers crossed into Romania just fleeing from the Germans, and the Romanians just snatched up these tanks and pressed them into their own armed forces. So I had to have one. I love playing early war now, so I had to have a little R35. Game-wise, they're not great. Luckily, with Romania's special rules, one of them is Axis support. And so I get to take one Romanian tank and one German tank. And that's probably the only way that you could bring an R35 and it be somewhat effective. Basically what you got here is armored 8 all around, which is nice. But you got a single low velocity gun, light AT gun, I believe. So that's only a +3 penetration. It's also slow. And you've got the one-man turret rule, which means you have to roll an order check if you want to advance, even if you have no pins. There's no machine gun on this one. I'm a little confused at some of the different entries for the R35, because they appeared all over the world in World War II. Seems like some of them had machine guns and some of them don't. This one doesn't, so with just the gun on there, it's kind of just a crappy little tank. Probably worse than anything I even have for my Japanese, but the Romanians had them, so I had to have one. Like I was saying before, one of the advantages of playing Romanians is you get the Axis support rule. And like I said, talking about the R35, you get to take a German tank also. That could be that's actually any German unit. There are a couple exceptions, but I like to run 2 tanks because tanks are so much fun. So this is the Panzer 38T from Warlord. This is a fantastic little plastic kit. I've built this one and the Mortar 3, which is based off the 38T, and they are both my favorite plastic kits from Warlord by far. They're not artillery scaled up kits like most of Warlord's plastic offerings, so I don't know if that means these ones were designed in-house at Warlord, but they are just fantastic. But yeah, so this one we've got a light AT gun, a coax machine gun, and a Hall machine gun, and it's a light tank, so armor 8. So yeah, for early war, this should do just fine taking on Soviet tanks. Might have a little trouble against like a T-34-76, but it's definitely viable. And anything lesser than a T-34, I feel like we'll have no problem. Luckily, this kit comes with a ton of different decal options. Romanian, Hungarian, I think Bulgarian also. But yeah, I got a bunch of Romanian decals just from this kit, and I've put them on a couple different vehicles. So yeah, this will be my Axis support. I love just the rivets on the tank. I think that's such a cool look, even though I think they tend to bounce around as shrapnel when they were hit in real life, so that's not replicated in bolt action. We don't got to worry about it. As you get into 1944, the Romanians started grabbing Soviet T-60 tanks and slapping anti-tank guns on them to give them some mobile firepower. So this is a TACM T-60. This kit is from Great Escape Games, resin and metal, mostly resin. It was not a joy to put together, I'll be honest. Consider myself a decent modeler, but this just had so many fit issues, and let's see if we can see it on camera, but the back is actually pretty warped. Not anything I could really do about that. I don't know if that is Great Escape's fault or if the resin just kind of warped. in the post coming from overseas, or if it just sat in the store for way too long. Who knows? But luckily, once it's painted, and you can see I got the foliage on there, I've got the crew on the table, you're not going to notice. So, yeah, this guy is armor 7, almost like a Martyr. I think a Martyr 3 has armor 7. Medium anti-tank gun, but again, no machine gun. So just the anti-tank gun. It's open-topped, which means it's going to take pins from small arms fire. Armor's paper thin. So really, I'm just taking this for rule of cool and rule of unique. I think it is a cool little vehicle. Yeah, that's about all there is to say about it. Now, I was talking quite a bit about the Fortress Budapest book, and one of the great things that provides for the Romanians is a late war Allied selector. Like I said, the Romanians switched over to the Allied side, late 1944, and what that selector gives you is a whole new set of special rules. So you get a bonus infantry squad for free, which is super nice. But you also get access to Soviet armor. I had built this. This is a Rubicon. I think it's an M4A2 Sherman. Fantastic kit. Cannot recommend Rubicon highly enough. But yeah, painted up in Soviet colors because I used to have a Soviet army. And I loved how this tank came together. It's one of my favorites that I've painted. Even though it's just basic olive drab. But luckily, I can take this now with my Romanians. It's basically the Soviets just giving them some tank support. So I can only take one tank with this selector, but this guy actually knocked out a Tiger the last game I played with my Romanians. So he's crushing it. But yeah, so it's a Sherman, so armor 9, all the things that come with the Sherman, but you can see the long gun on there. It's a heavy anti-tank gun. So lots of firepower. Hull machine gun, coax machine gun, 50 cal on top. Plenty of firepower to deal with like any late war German tanks. And like I said, I think it looks so cool. Really proud of the paint job. And I feel that I'm not going to see one of these on the table against me. I mean, Romania is already pretty unique to have a Lend-Lease Sherman like this. I think this is going to be like a pretty cool force for people to see. All right, let's talk about infantry units. So like I said, all of these miniatures are from Great Escape Games. They have a fantastic line of metal Romanians, both in winter uniform and in summer uniform. I went with the winter uniform. Could use them outside of Stalingrad, could use them for Budapest. And I think they're just fantastic models. So what I've got here, what you're seeing is 3 infantry squads. They're all the same. I've got a NCO with an SMG. We've got 1 LMG and then 7 riflemen. So 3 9-man squads. Yeah, they're all different sets from Great Escape Games. One of them is in summer dress. I just didn't want to deal with getting the same poses if I bought a duplicate metal set. Even though one of the things I really like about winter units is that you can kind of paint them whatever color you want. It might be hard to tell in the video, but I've got various shades of khaki and green for the long overcoats. Kind of just breaks up the monotony of painting everything like baby poop brown. But I did end up getting one summer kit. Try to make them look wintry. Again, tabletop standard, I feel like they look fine on the table. You don't even really notice. And then to the left there, you can see my lieutenant and his assistant. He's a super cool model. He's got this big fur overcoat and fur hat on, little scarf. One thing the Romanians did not have a lot of was trucks. So even though I've got all these guys, I'm not really planning on getting any trucks for this force. Maybe like a horse tow would be a little more appropriate, or a mule team. But yeah, these guys will just be foot sloggers and they'll just have to run across the board. So another great advantage of buying the Fortress Budapest book is that you get access to Romanian combat engineers. And these guys can be used in any theater selector. For the Romanians, it doesn't just have to be the one included in the Budapest book, which is super nice. So they're just added to the generic platoon. Use them early war, use them late war. Axis or allies, doesn't matter. This is going to give you some pretty good firepower. So as you can see up front, I've got a flamethrower, but this squad also comes with Panzerfaust. Obviously, you can't use that early war, but you definitely can use it late war. But you can see the guys have anti-tank grenades. They've got mines. You can see the guy in the back there has a big anti-tank grenade. And you can take these guys as regular or veteran, which is super nice. You can, go light on the points with your regulars. But you can also make them veteran to kind of be your hard-hitting unit. That flamethrower is a big plus. So yeah, this is how I run these guys. Again, I mean, I legally could get a truck to put in my list to cart these guys around. But I think staying true to form for Romania, they just had a chronic shortage of trucks. So I'm not going to put these guys in a truck. So have to be a little smarter with either deploying them or maybe putting them in outflank and just having them come in and wreak havoc. All right, let's talk about team weapons. First up is a sniper team. Had to have this guy. I mean, snipers are pretty useful, but these minis are so cool. I love the hood. It was a good chance for me to give them some like white overcoats, kind of break up the monotony of the khakis and greens. But yeah, that model is so cool. But snipers are great for taking out team weapons and important targets, NCOs, light machine guns in a squad, Panzerfaust in squads. Plus you get to forward deploy them, so kind of a no-brainer to take a sniper. Now this is kind of special. I saw in the Italy and the Axis book that the Romanians had access to Panzerfaust. Now, I couldn't find any photos of them online, but apparently there is some evidence that the Romanians used a couple Panzerfausts, so had to have one. It's good. Good anti-tank. It's a little expensive, but they're super cool, and they're definitely potent on the table. But there is not a single Romanian Panzer Shrek model out there. So I had to build one. I think the guy was originally holding a MP40, but this is probably my only gripe with Great Escape games, at least their Romanian line. For some reason, all of the Romanians that were modeled with MP40s, the MP40s were gigantic. I think I made a post about it on my Instagram, so if you do some digging, you could find it. But they're literally just like massive. So I cut them out anyways. But yeah, this guy originally had an MP40, and I decided to give him a Panzer Shrek. Did not have one. Didn't feel like buying a model just to cut the Panzer Shrek off of, so this is actually a toothpick. And I just cut the pointy ends off. And I found some other pieces lying around in my bits box to kind of make it look like a Panzer Shrek. I think that's actually a shovel. Or maybe even the shovel pouch. That's like the blast shield. And then I used parts from AT rifle for the back and for the sight. I mean, obviously you can see how the AT rifle part on the back isn't flush. Definitely did pretty quick. And I hadn't started using green stuff yet, so maybe if I had some green stuff on hand, I could have made that look a little bit better, but on the table, it looks like a Panzer Shrek. Not too bad. I think I used a plastic arm also. A little wonky, but again, try finding a Romanian Panzer Shrek model out there. I bet you can't. So, here we got our classic MMG I've seen a ton of reference photos with Romanians with this medium machine gun. I can't remember the model off the top of my head. I think it might be a Czech gun, but someone can let me know if I'm wrong. But yeah, saw the photos, had to have one. I know in bolt action they're pretty lackluster, but they're also really iconic. And if I was ever to take my Romanians into a game of like Chain of Command, they're much more effective, so had to have one. I think it's a cool model. The miniatures look pretty great. Added a little extra basing to this one, and yeah, helps to fill out points. And I mean, actually, in the last game I played, yeah, it did pretty well. I think it lost both assistants, but I took out a Hungarian MG with it, so at least made up for its points. It's all about just using them intelligently, not putting them where snipers can easily pick them off, and they can be effective. So if you decide to play Romanians as Axis, one of their special rules is French artillery doctrine, which means they get a free medium howitzer or medium anti-tank gun. This is a fantastic rule. It just gives so much firepower to the Romanians. I really think they're actually a top tier army. They're just not as well known, and I think access to miniatures, especially from Warlord, makes them a little less played. But yeah, so here we have a medium howitzer. It's a 4-man team, and then you got a spotter up front. The gun itself is kind of just a generic howitzer that my friend printed out for me. Great Escape Games did not have a Romanian howitzer kit when I bought into this army. Since I completed it, they have released one, so I do plan on getting that at some point in the future. But for now, I just kind of have this generic 3D print one that has definitely served in all of my armies, so maybe not the most historically accurate, but it's nice to just have a gun on the table. But yeah, medium howitzer, a lot of firepower, can fire direct or indirect, and when you pair that with the mortar, you just have a ton of firepower at your hands. And last but not least, we have the mortar. I think in my Japanese video I said that the medium mortar is an auto include, and that's true here too. I think this is actually modeled as a light mortar. You can see it's pretty small, and I just decided to make it so that I could take it either way. So could either take it as a 3-man light mortar team or 3-man medium mortar team with a spotter. But yeah, I always bring a mortar. Just having indirect fire, putting pressure on your enemy's units, either on objectives or your enemy's teams that are, difficult to move. It's just pretty valuable. It doesn't always hit, but it is always a psychological threat, and is just worth taking in every army in my book. All right, so there you have it. That's my Romanian platoon. Obviously, tanks would be switched out, depending on which part of the war and how many points I've got to play with. I do intend on getting a couple things for this army. Like I said before, I want to get an updated medium howitzer model. Great Escape Games has just recently released one, so I do plan on getting that. But if you do get the Fortress Budapest book and you look at the Romanian selector in there, there's a special rule called Stalin's Cannon Fodder. So if you purchase 3 infantry squads, you get a free infantry squad that costs equal to your cheapest unit, your cheapest infantry squad. So since these 3 units are all the same, the 3 infantry squads, I would just get a 4th. And as you can see here, I don't have one. I had to borrow a buddy's Soviet squad the last time I played. So I think I'm actually going to try some Romanians from Empress. They are in summer dress, but I don't think that'll matter too much. And I really like Empress miniatures. And then after that, I'd like to get a couple other tanks. I'm a big tank fan. I am waiting on a R35 from a buddy. It's another 3D print, but this one I'm going to modify a little bit. The Romanians kind of, like with the TACM T60, they modified what they had because they couldn't produce anything. So basically they took an R35, slapped a bigger gun in it, barely fit in the turret. And there isn't a model for it. There isn't a 3D print for it, so I think I'm just going to scratch build the barrel. I think it just upgrades it to a light AT gun, so not even a very good upgrade. But they had them up until 1944, until they switched over to the Soviets, so might as well. Just an extra dash of uniqueness. There's also a tiny, I think it's an R2 tank. It might even be placed in the armored car slot. I'd have to check. But Great Escape Games also just released a kit for that, and I'd love to have one. Just to say I have one. But yeah, so that's my Romanian platoon. Let me know if you have any questions or suggestions. If these videos are pretty boring, let me know. I know I just drone on, and I'm not great at talking. So if you've made it this far, you must be really bored. But yeah, so comment below. I do have a link to Scale History SLC Discord server below. Check that out. Just a bunch of guys that talk hobby and talk bolt action. And yeah, if you're like me and you're just a nerd for all of this, it's a great place to hang out. So come hang out with us. Other than that, take care.